first responders are especially prone to these, chemicals and heavy metals that are, in fact, even the aqueous film forming foam is extremely toxic.
Welcome to Elevate, the gathering spot for first responders, their families, and the communities that support them. Welcome back, Elevators, and thank you so much for tuning in this week. I've got a great guest with me today. I cannot wait for you to meet him. We stumbled across each other, I think, on a Facebook Facebook page of some sort, and had that 15-minute that stretched into an hour and 15 minutes because we had so much in common and so much to talk about, because what he's doing is not only helping people that are non-first responders, but he is also very dedicated to the first responder space, and I'll let him explain a lot of that stuff to you. But today we've got Dan Root with us. Dan, say hi to everybody and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about.
Well, thank you, Kyle, and thank you all for listening to the show today, because it's going to be full of all kinds of interesting stuff, I hope. But yes, my name is Daniel Root. Call me Dan. I am the leading detoxinician, and what we do is we actually help the body to eliminate the barriers to good health, which are the environmental toxicants. And so first responders are especially prone to these, chemicals and heavy metals that are, in fact, even the aqueous film forming foam is extremely toxic. And
Well, yeah,
there are so many other.
that's all over the internet now.
Yeah. And there's so many other chemicals that you guys and gals are exposed to, and including PCBs, which we have a lot of experience, especially with transformer fires where PCBs were involved. So, we're so used to working with first responders. In fact, we'll talk a bit, I hope, about the New York Rescue Workers Detoxification Project, which actually treated over 5,000 first responders that were involved, actually also volunteers and some civilians that were involved with the cleanup efforts of Ground Zero. But anyway, the protocol or the program itself utilizes or exploits really a unique function of niacin, and I'm sure we'll probably go a little bit deeper into that. But more importantly, we take advantage of the largest detox organ of the body, which is the skin. And the skin is about 22 square feet of detox organ. And so we want to try to use that to the utmost ability. And so over the 36 years of occupational medicine and now additional 10 or so years of me doing this, not just in occupational, but also bringing it to the public. So, we started this out in 2014 to bring it to the public, and actually finally released the book in 2019. In fact, if I may, I'll just bring that up. So Sauna Detoxification using niacin, which is not coming into the camera. There, maybe that.
Yeah, because it's blue and you've got it. Yeah, there you go. Well, I may put it over as an actual file, and we'll have the link to that book in the description,
Wonderful,
of course, along with all of Dan's information. So,
yeah. Now this is who I am, but more importantly is how my father got here to where I can.
Yeah, that was my next question. Yeah, my next question was, how did you get to this space? And because when we spoke, like I said before in the beginning, we spoke for over an hour easily, and we just had so much in common and so much. We were both very interested in each other's path, and it was a great conversation. And the conversation that we had that day was so great to hear the background of why Dan is in this space. And go ahead and share that with us. Not the first meeting, the hour and a half version, but whatever shrunk down version you have that explains why you're doing what you're doing.
So it does take us back to my father, and I'll try to make it brief, but he was a unique flying physician in the United States Air Force. So actually he spent 20 years in the Air Force. And as a flying physician, he was doing a lot of in-flight medical research, including chemical and biological defense systems for air crews. So he worked with both the United States Air Force, and he was an exchange officer with the Royal Air Force and stationed at the Institute of Aviation Medicine in Farnborough. Now, the thing is that one of his posts included at Beale Air Force Base as the flight surgeon of the SR-71 Blackbird. And if you don't know what that Blackbird is, just picture anything that Batman would fly. So, but anyway, the SR-71 Blackbird was designed to leak fuel on the ground, and then at high speeds and high altitude and high temperatures, it would seal up. But on the ground crews would actually be exposed to these exotic JP7 fuels, as well as the oils and solvents and they were coming down with some pretty strange conditions and even cancers. So as their flight surgeon, he was
Wow.
hoping to be able to find something that would help them. But to this day, there's nothing in the medical literature on how to detox chemicals. We've got chelation for heavy metals, and in fact, in occupational medicine, we certainly would recommend that an acute toxicity of heavy metals goes to chelation. But for most chemicals, which actually are as bad, if not worse, than these heavy metals, most people fixate on heavy metals, but literally there's so many other chemicals. In fact, 100,000 chemicals are in industry right now, and over 4,000 per year seems to be added. And in the state of California, we got Prop 65, where there's over 900 chemicals known to cause cancer, birth defects, or reproductive harm. And so we know that chemicals are really bad, and less than 10% are tested for human safety, and less than 1% of those in combinations. So anyway, the problem was that he couldn't do anything for these ground crews. So when he retired from the military and opened his practice in 1981, in Sacramento, he started to see patients presenting with exposures from workplace, and he had nothing to offer. I could tell the story about these two painters, which were his index case, and go into great detail there. But for time's sake, I'll just say that he was trying to treat these two patients that were really exposed to the paint fumes and solvents. In fact, they were inside of a 650,000-gallon water tank trying to paint the interior without any kind of personal protective equipment like respirators.
Oh, without a breathing, without a
So
boy, the 80s, right?
yeah, and so they were suffering with ataxia or clumsiness. They were also their IQ and,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
cognitive
Getting high.
function.
Yep.
Yeah, and so their wives were ready to divorce them because they were argumentative. And so anyway, they came in for help. But
Yeah.
really, to this day, like I said, the only thing that's in the literature is stuff that we've published with this program. So serendipitously, he gets this brochure from a company called Body Pure that talks about niacin exercise and sauna for drug addiction rehab, which my father wasn't in drug rehab, so he wasn't really caring, but he literally threw the thing in the trash can. But because of the word sauna, which we've had saunas in our life since the 70s, I actually have been using saunas since 1973 when I was 10 years old. So anyway, the thing is that he realized that word sauna has some validity, so he called them up, and he found out they were literally a splinter group of Scientologists bringing L. Ron Hubbard's drug addiction rehab program to the public without that stigma of Scientology recruitment. And so he wound up basically, taking some of his clients and running them through their program and getting results. And so he realized he needed to bring this into his own practice. And so they joint ventured as Health Med and started to really get serious about treating both drug addiction and occupational exposures. And mind you, this is the time frame where OSHA wasn't really, fully in vogue, I guess. So there was a lot of
Right. Wasn't heavily regulated like it is
yeah,
now. So
exactly. And now, because the fact that it was the purification rundown used in occupational medicine repurposed, the state of California Medical Board opened a probe on this, thinking that he's a quack and a charlatan. So he submitted a 50-page response letter that had 23 pages of cited medical literature that they reviewed, and they found that this program actually was or did have merit. So they allowed him to continue. And then the state of California became his largest client after that. So that's a little history there.
wow. Well,
But
yeah, that's great.
yeah, the programs that they did, the projects though that they've actually published many studies on, included things like the New York Rescue Workers Detox Project, where over 5,000 first responders, like I already mentioned, and civilians and other volunteers, they were run through the program free of charge, and that was of course thanks to Tom Cruise and some other donations and grants. But
Really? Okay.
yeah,
Great.
nobody had to pay to go through the program. In fact, there's a wonderful story with Anne-Marie Principe that people can find if they look for Dr. Daniel Amen's The Brain Warrior's Way podcast. There's an episode with
Yep.
my
I
father
know
and I.
Dr. Amen. Yep.
Anne-Marie, she's a fabulous case story because her doctor basically told her to go home and take care of her affairs because she wasn't going to make it. She was actually a businesswoman who stepped out into that cloud of that came rolling down Manhattan. And so her lungs filled up to the point where I think she either had 20 or 30% remaining in only one lung that was working. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, but she's alive and well today because of that.
Wow.
anyway, so the way I got involved with this was that I literally had to go through the program to become an employee of the company, and they needed me to come on board because I was a computer geek. You know, I was the guy that installed the first computer system for their practice, and of course back then there wasn't Windows or anything like standardized. So
Yeah.
I wound up finding a
Right.
platform that I could then add an operating system to, as well as the medical billing system. This is all text based, So anyway, I installed that, and I realized that these guys didn't have a clue how to use it because they'd never seen a computer before. And this is 1985, 86 timeframe, and I had been involved with computers
Mhm.
thanks to high school since 1979. So I'd had a computer like an Apple II Plus. But anyway, I went to work for them, and in terms of my employment, I had to go through the detox program, and I went through it kicking and screaming. I wanted nothing to do with the Scientology nonsense, and I was probably their worst patient. And then on day 33, I hit this thing called N phenomena, and it's something I really, really wish for everybody. Unfortunately, I think today we're being more polluted than we've ever been. Like in the 80s and 90s, we weren't nearly as polluted as we are today, but or contaminated, if you will. But N phenomena was characterized by
Our
having,
food, our food alone.
yeah. So it's characterized by having an overall sense of well-being, got high energy, stamina, and performance. And my brain fog lifted. I didn't even know I had brain fog. But we also used to do IQ testing, and the IQ scores on average would increase by 10 points. And I did that. I got that. That was the average.
Mm,
And then the other things too were like my color vision, my sense of smell, and my sense of taste became more vivid. My dreams became more vivid, and I remember them better. And to this day, at 60 years old, I'll be 61 this year. I still feel like a healthy 31 or 30-year-old that has all of those same things that N Phenomena provided. But literally, because of the fact that they had moved all of the detox program out to New York, there wasn't an active center in Sacramento. And unfortunately, in 2012, my wife needed a detox. We didn't know it at the time because we were what I call the social allopathic conditioning spell, where my wife had hyperthyroidism, and her primary care practitioner just said, "Oh, we'll just take care of that thyroid. We'll radioactivate that thing. Use radioactive iodine, and put you on just a synthetic thyroid, and you'll be fine." Well, it turns out she got worse. In fact, unfortunately, to this day, my wife is actually mostly confined to a wheelchair. She's pretty well disabled. It wasn't just
mm.
because of that. There was other things that happened, but she's beyond our program, unfortunately. But I will say that when we realized that if we had just changed our diet, because we did finally, go do some research to see what we could have done differently. Turns out if we just changed our diet and stopped eating the prepackaged, processed, convenience fast foods, and eat the
Hmm.
GMO free or non-GMO or whole foods, don't overcook them, that kind of thing. And then also detox
Yeah.
her. We would have, because endocrine disrupting chemicals and xenoestrogens are absolutely everywhere. I mean, the plastic bottles, for example, have BPA's and phthalates, and there's just all kinds of ways we're getting poisoned with these things. Fluoride in the water is another one that's an endocrine disruptor. Anyway, if we just detoxed her, she wouldn't be in the predicament she's in today. So my anger from
Interesting.
realizing that we had the best program available, but it was not running, led me to really start to think about how I could bring this to the public. But I got to tell you, the original program was
Okay.
4.5 to 5 hours. And that was
Wow.
absolutely grueling.
So what you the when you say program, that's like the for lack of better terms, treatment is another word for program for you right now.
Yes.
Like the session that you were to go to do a detox, is that a one and done, or is that like a multiple week thing?
So it for me was 33 days, but on average for the
Okay.
the 4.5 to 5 hour a day program, it's 21 days. But that's because of several things that we've realized over the years and have been able to advance that we no longer do that
Okay.
method. And in fact, the Hubbard method was all that they were using while the Scientologists were involved. Now, they never came back from New York, so we parted ways with them in 2013. We have no affiliation or any kind of association with Church Scientology. But because of the work they did, there was a lot of studies that were able to be, published and peer reviewed that indicate that the protocol itself works. We just happen to have a much better way of doing it now. And there was two things that we really changed
Okay.
immediately. And the first one was the saunas. because the original program only knew about dry saunas. So they would have to go, if you've been in a dry
Okay.
sauna, it's 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're pretty oppressively hot. So you're only able to stay in them for 15 to 20 minutes before you have to cool down in 5 to 10 minutes. And the
Right.
other thing too is that the niacin that's involved with our protocol, it's not a supplement; it's a catalyst. And it actually, if you have done the niacin, then you know about the flush. But the flush was what was believed to be the primary action that was the reason for niacin. And if you don't know what a flush is, folks, it's literally where the body turns red in the upper portions. The skin turns bright red because of what's called vasodilation, which I'm sure most of your audience knows about that. But niacin is
Right.
something that increases blood flow to the surface areas through the capillaries. And that
Okay.
also, by the way, triggers a histamine response, which can cause an itchy, prickly feeling. And some people don't like that. Others tend to. But anyway, the thing is that was what was believed to be the mechanism. And it made sense because, whenever you're producing ATP energy,
Okay.
right, your body is actually
Hmm.
liberating toxins with the free fatty acids after the breakdown of the triglycerides in lipolysis. Now, I explain all this in the book, but the thing is that
Right. 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 Yeah. We can't get too much into the science just
I
for
know,
timing,
but
but
it's important.
yeah, but the like you said, our listeners are very
Yeah.
medical, and well, I mean, most of them would be medical of some sort, of some degree. So go
Yeah.
ahead.
So the vasodilation was what was thought to be the reason why, and because if there's toxins in the blood, they're going to get pushed out through to the capillaries where then they can be sweated out. And I want to come back to the word sweat, by the way, but I want to continue by saying though that the actual secondary
All
effect
right.
that niacin induces is called rebound lipolysis, and without going into too much detail, it increases the flow of free fatty acids by 4 times, and that translates to about 3 times the normal liberation of toxins out of fat during its peak. And so this whole thing is explained in the book, but the point of it is that we have to liberate the toxins that get stored in fat because they're lipophilic, and they're also mostly man-made chemicals that the liver's never been able to break down into a
Flush
more
out.
water-soluble derivative. So we're not detoxing most of the man-made chemicals. They're storing in fat, and they're causing mitochondrial dysfunction, just so you know. But the thing is that with the sweat, coming back to the sweat, in fact, I've written, or excuse me, I've had to write a blog that explains that when I see people sending me debunking articles saying, "Oh, you can't sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna," I go, "That's right, you don't." And they said, "Well, you wrote the book on it." And I said, "Well, you're talking about the word toxin, and the definition of toxin is an antigenic poison or venom of plant or animal origin, excuse me, produced by microorganisms that in low concentrations in the body can cause harm or disease." And so there's nothing about heavy metals or man-made chemicals in the definition of toxin. What we're really talking about are toxicants. And toxicants are mostly the environmental toxicants.
Toxicants. Okay.
Toxicants, yes. And so environmental toxicants are actually what we're dealing with. And like I said, there's over 100,000 of them in industry right now. And so we need to be able to do something with these toxicants that come into the body. And once they're in the body, by the way, they're known as xenobiotics or foreign substances. And most of these are lipophilic, so they're fat attracted. Now, they're not going to, because they're lipophilic, they're also not going to come out through watery eccrine sweat. They're hydrophobic. So the way we have to get them out is we have to produce the sebaceous sweat, which is an apocrine sweat, and it actually is the sebum from the sebaceous oil glands that are attached to hair follicles, and they keep the hair follicle lubricated and the skin and hair moist and all that. But that sebum has to melt at a high temperature, and what we have found is that the infrared saunas produce that at much lower temperatures, much faster. And because of these two things that we have
Okay.
now scientifically validated, we are able to take a 4.5 hour program, or 5 even hour program, down to just 2 hours. And that has made a huge difference.
Okay.
And you can do this in the comfort of
Yeah.
your own home. But there is one thing I will say.
Mm.
This is a 30-day commitment. And I know most first responders are just totally not going to be able to commit to something like that. So I've got a document that I'll give you the link to put in the description of this video. It's a niacin flush
Okay.
sauna detox, which you can do anytime you want, and it's able to take advantage of the flush, because there has always been an advantage, having a flush and being in a sauna or immediately after. So I have a whole
Okay.
thing about how to do that, and we'll share that with your audience.
Okay, great. Thank you. When it comes to niacin, can you just explain that a little bit more? Is that a drink? Do you get it through? What's the best way to get it into the body? Because I think I remember us talking about it and you mentioned earlier it's not a supplement, but it's something that you have to ingest, correct?
Yes, absolutely. In fact,
Or
you
okay,
won't get.
so just speak a little bit more on niacin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you won't get the kind of niacin dosing that we need from just regular food. You will need to take a supplement, and we actually do have a kit designed for the program. In fact, it was designed for the original Hubbard method. And by the way, one thing I didn't mention before is that we use binders now. We didn't use binders before, and binders like zeolite, activated
Okay.
charcoal, and in some cases bentonite clay or enteros gel. So based on the type of toxicities, there are different binders that are suitable for each type of toxin. But anyway, so the niacin itself, you have to be able to dose correctly and time correctly. So I mentioned this rebound lipolysis,
Mm,
and that actually triggers after about 3 hours, from ingesting the niacin. And that's because niacin actually has to metabolize fully before it can trigger this effect. And so you have to know the dosing and you have to know the timing in order to be able to trigger this effect. So I look at it as a catalyst, like I mentioned, it's not a supplement. And so by knowing how to
okay.
dose and time it, which is explained in the book, but I also, by the way, help people with remote detox coaching. So that's something that, we can talk about as well.
Right, I would assume that someone just, "Here's a sauna, here's some niacin, figure it out." No, I'm sure that you have a program that explains that in detail, and we'll talk about it. We'll be able to put the links to all that stuff in later and talk more about that as well. So the niacin is basically, like you said, the catalyst. It's the thing that makes it work, not just sitting in a hot, wet sauna, right?
That's right. Yeah. And in fact, the one that I've made available for first responders is easier to do. You can do it anytime you want, and it's just about knowing how to get a flush to occur. Because by the way, when you take niacin on a more regular basis, like on our protocol, the actual prostaglandin PGD2 hormones that cause the vasodilation will deplete from the cells, and so the flush will go away. So we have to understand how to dose that as well for just doing a niacin flush sauna detox. And I explain again
Right.
all this detail because we can go way into the weeds on this one. But anyway.
Right, right, right. Well, and this I think I think you're on to something here when it comes to the timing, because in the recent year or so, I have heard of a lot of people and people I know that have home saunas now that bought them off of Amazon. I know that you offer a sauna as well that's more geared to your program, of course, and of course that'll be in the link as well. But also the cold dips and the cold submersion and all this. So right now these treatments, if you will, lack of better terms, to say the least, we've got people that are exploring these cold dips and these sauna treatments that people are starting to understand that it does things that help you. So for you to jumpstart it on the other end, a lot of people think, okay, when I sweat, I feel like I'm getting something out of my body that doesn't need to be in there, whether it be toxins or just whatever that does go through the sweat glands. But with these cold dips for metabolism and for vasodilation, vasoconstriction, all that stuff, and then the saunas, and there's I don't know it well enough personally. I've got my two paramedic partners that I have on a every third basis. They both do the cold plunge and the saunas. They have some sort of regiment, right? I don't know what it is. I don't like cold. I don't like cold. I don't like cold. I know I live in Ohio and I used to love the cold, but I can't stand getting into cold water. I don't know why I became such a wimp at cold water anymore. I used to not care about it when I was younger, but now I'm like, I just can't even. I think it was that challenge where they dumped ice water over your head. I think that's what ruined me. that was traumatic to me. No, just kidding. So, but nonetheless, now getting into something hot, and like I don't mind going out in the summertime and working my butt off and getting hot and sweating, and yeah, this is great, for all those reasons. So I could probably get on board with something with the sauna because it's not cold.
Yeah, what you're
but
describing
but
is
so tell
contrast.
more. Talk,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
describing.
Talk more about, do you do anything with the cold plunging as well, or just the sauna stuff?
Well, the contrast therapy that you're describing is very valid, and yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. I don't have a cold plunge here, but I will certainly go from my sauna to a cold shower. And the beauty of that is that the pores will seal up and keep the heat inside, and that allows you to then wash
Mm,
off any toxins that have been excreted from your sauna. In fact, I do sauna daily for 30 minutes. By the way, it's a daily routine, and I find it keeps me young. I'm turning 61 this year. I feel like a healthy 30-year-old. So, it's a case of just doing sauna
right,
regularly is how I maintain my health. And I look forward to a long health
right,
span, which is a word that I'm hoping to see used a lot more because it's not one I created, but it's
right,
actually a good word because, people want to live longer, but also not be suffering with conditions. And speaking of
right.
conditions,
Or bogged down. Yeah.
yeah, this protocol has been a mind blow for how many conditions we've reversed. And I am talking about any non-communicable and non-genetic disease that has an etiology, or I would say they have no known etiology in the medical literature, but you will find that most of them have an environmental toxicant relationship. And again, the mitochondrial
Mm,
dysfunction, like I mentioned earlier, is actually what's going on. So we're getting oxidative stress, firstly, from these toxins or xenobiotics in the body. And second of all, they're disrupting the enzymes and proteins needed by the mitochondria to produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate energy. So the
yep,
toxins
yep.
get in the fat, and you'll see people have stubborn fat they can't get rid of. It's because it's not producing ATP, and it's just stagnant, and it's attracting more lipids and more lipophilic
Mm,
xenobiotics. So until you get that stuff cleaned out, you're just
okay.
basically going to suffer with not only the stubborn weight, but also conditions that are mind blow for me because when we were in occupational medicine and drug addiction rehab, we had blinders on. We were literally focused on acute poisonings and these disasters like 9/11, and actually we worked with the children of Chernobyl as consultants, and there were several other
Oh, wow.
studies that were related to disasters. In fact, Flint, Michigan water was a disaster. So uh,
Oh,
but anyway, the thing is that the conditions that I have seen reversed are everything from fibromyalgia. We've got asthma. I've got muscular MS. Sorry, and there's even diabetes type
multiple
2.
sclerosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allergies. I've seen endometriosis was a big shock, but that
Wow.
was
Right.
one that was a mind blow. But
Interesting.
literally any condition that has no known etiology, you ought to look into this protocol.
Interesting. So you spoke about earlier when you mentioned that you get in a sauna for 30 days, but then you're talking about a protocol for with the niacin and in conjunction with the sauna. So when you're jumping in your sauna for 30 minutes, you're not in protocol.
Correct.
That's just the that's just the sauna time outside of the protocol. So when you're in protocol, you're doing something deliberately where you're doing it every day, or, for our schedules, trying to work it in with being at the end of a shift when you come home, or at the beginning of a shift, or beginning of a shift before you go to work. That's the one thing that I would be concerned with the first responders. So can you describe the protocol a little bit more in depth, like maybe give like a just a quick overview of how that would flow for the first. I'm sure you mentioned that you work with first responders, so you can speak on that too, and maybe if you have any, if there's any first responders that have gone through the program that are willing to have like a statement or a testimonial, we can always put that in the bottom too, or I'm sure your website has all that stuff on it. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the first responders and how the flow of the protocol, more than just your 30-minute, hey, let's go warm up in a sauna.
right. So the New York Rescue Workers Detox Project, for example, in fact, I have plenty of testimonials from that we can share. But the way the
Right.
program works, and now this is different from the way they were doing it because obviously we've advanced it from the original Hubbard method.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
you advanced, yeah.
so today, what
Technology.
right? So today you would basically take niacin about 2.5 to 3 hours before you're ready to do anything else. And in fact, a lot of people will just set their alarm for 4:30 in the morning, take their niacin, and then go back to sleep for 2 to 3 hours, and then when they get up, they can start their
Okay.
daily regimen, right? And so the next step would be to in fact, there's oils, lecithin, and some other component elements that help support other detox organs as well as replenishing vitamins, minerals, and things like that, electrolytes that are also being lost to sweat. And so we have to make sure all those are included. But just to give you a thumbnail sketch, so you take your
Yeah,
niacin
that
about
makes
two and a
sense.
half to 3 hours before you do exercise. And it's 20 to 30 minutes of low impact aerobic exercise, simply to get the heart rate back up so that you can push these blood-borne toxins back out to the dermal layers. And then the sauna is about 45 minutes in an infrared sauna. And you do work up to that if you've never used a sauna, but you work up to 45 minutes in the first sauna cycle, and then you'll do a 5 to 15 minute cool down, followed by another 30-minute sauna cycle. Now you're going to stay hydrated throughout all that. We have a beverage called CalMag, which is a calcium and magnesium blend that uses apple cider vinegar, and that is actually to make the calcium more bioavailable. And that helps support the muscles from cramping, spasms, things like that, plus the bones. So it helps support the bones, but then there are electrolytes. But the sauna temperature, by the way, in an infrared sauna can be like 135 to 140. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And in fact,
Okay.
you can even open the door in an infrared sauna and let some cold air in, because it forces the emitters to turn back on, which is where you get the benefit of infrared. Unlike a dry convection sauna
Okay.
that heats the air first, and then using conduction heats the body, and so that's why they run so hot. But with the infrared, we're able to actually
Gotcha.
do it better at lower temperatures. So, but there's other
Yes,
things too,
more
binders.
efficiently. Yeah.
So, but that's in a nutshell.
When it th That's a nutshell. Thank you so much. That helps me a lot. I'm trying to wrap my head around the concept. So I'm like, so part of this is me understanding it, and I know if I'm trying to understand it, our listeners may be trying to understand it as well. So just like any good uh treatment that you may have to do, braces take like 2 years, other things, other type of mental health things take habits, what have you. This is no different than that. So the mindset to get into dedicating yourself to do this is also something that I wouldn't mind you talking about just a little bit. And then also on the back end of that, have you found anything, because the Elevate podcast is a podcast that deals with the mental load that we carry. Have you found any benefits of that aspect, the mental wellness, the mental health of people that go through this, and can you address that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's not something I would say is a primary focus of this, but we've certainly seen, because niacin is actually used for anti-anxiety and anti-depression. In fact, the late
Mm,
Abram Hoffer, Dr. Abram Hoffer, a psychiatrist, yep, he actually was treating and curing schizophrenia. He was finding that high doses of niacin would actually reverse schizophrenia, and it was what he
hmm,
figured to be late stage pellagra, which is niacin deficiency. But because niacin alone is useful for anxiety and depression, it does have a mood enhancing capability. Now, also, we do know that toxins in the body also affect the brain and the way people perceive things, and so there is a lot of benefit by detoxing the body. And yes, we do detox the brain. So we do see people who
okay.
have even like the anger issues, or just uncontrollable types of emotions and things like that, have benefited greatly by doing this program. Even endocrine disrupting, hormones
Great.
or toxins that affect the hormones are, going to play a role in this. So once you detox the body of all of them, you're essentially, finding that we do find that many conditions are reversed. And because of the occupational medicine background, we weren't expecting this. And that's what was most exciting when I brought it to the public. And in fact, it literally took me 4 years to write the book,
Right.
because I needed to understand more about the world and what was, being or going on. Like, we have amalgam fillings with mercury. I see a lot of people who have gadolinium toxicity from MRIs. The radiologists don't realize at this point how toxic that metal is. It's a rare earth metal, and it dechelates in the body. And so I see many different kinds of bizarre conditions with gadolinium, and some of your audience may resonate with some of these. So there's things like electrical zaps or electrical sensations and brain zaps. There's deep or severe bone pain. There's things like the body temperatures, or you always feel like you're cold, hair loss, of course, brain fog, and cognitive issues, things like that. So, I mean, there's a
Right.
lot more than this, but we do see that the gadolinium is causing people more problems than they realize, and so they don't connect the dots after having an MRI. It's like they just think that their conditions are getting worse,
Mm.
but it's actually, it got worse. It was made worse. So we
Yeah.
detox that very
Made worse
well.
because of that. Gotcha, gotcha. So when it comes to, you do this out in Southern California, correct? I think that's where you
Actually, I'm in
mentioned you were.
Sacramento, but
Is there any other Sacramento?
yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not good on my geology of California. I've only been out there once. So, when it comes to your program, are there other places in the country that do this, or is this one of those things where right now you're one of the only ones that do it? Like, what have you found when it comes to people that are doing your protocol and other places that people can get this? Mind you, they can still do it via online coaching, like you just talked about, an online version of it. They get the niacin and the equipment, and then you coach them through the process. So that's wonderful about our technology nowadays. But is there any physical, like, actual clinics that you run, or where people come in and do this, or speak more about that, if that's even something that is
Yeah,
out there?
sadly, the center you see in this image here is the center that my father and I opened after, I think, well, it was probably 2016 that we actually opened the center, but he retired in 2019, and I had to surrender the space to the landlord. Anyway, from there, I moved in with a chiropractor who had a wellness center. And then not shortly thereafter, we set up, COVID hit. And so the lockdowns occurred, and essentially, we weren't really getting enough traffic to afford the place. And so once the lease expired at the end of 2022, we let it go. But I realized that because of my book, and because of how well technology has advanced, and the pricing of saunas are much more affordable, I can help people with the selection of a good sauna. And I actually have multiple manufacturers I do work with, because I feel like, if I worked with one manufacturer, for example, then I would be
Right.
missing out on opportunities to help others that don't have I was selling the Cadillac of the industry, Clearlight, you know, but not everybody can afford a Cadillac. So I have everything from the top
Right.
of the line all the way down to portables, but there are specific criteria we have, like EMFs or VOCs. So, electromagnetic fields can be a
Right.
problem for some. Some people are very EHS, or electro hypersensitive. And by the way, that's mostly a heavy metal problem. So if you have anybody that
Mm.
that's EHS, send them my way, because that's a heavy metal issue, and I can actually prove that. But the other thing too is that the VOCs, volatile organic compound off-gassing, is a problem with a lot of different saunas. So I only work with manufacturers who have the lowest in their industry. So in fact, I'll mention the names of Radiant
Gotcha.
Health saunas, as well as Sunstream saunas. And on my website at, if I may, get detoxinated.com, there is a shop with a sauna selector guide. And if you go there, you'll find out a lot of information. And I'm very open to working with people, so I can help you to make the best decision for a sauna. But I do not have a center currently, and I am able to work with people around the world. In fact, right now I've got well over 230 clients that I'm working with, who I would not have had a chance to work with if I was stuck in the center.
Right.
So, oh,
Right. If it wasn't for the technology, and the one good thing that came out of Zoom was this kind of format of, connecting via the internet. And
absolutely.
of course, more and more people are getting the internet nowadays, and it's going to be the way of life, as it already is, but even more so as the years come. So more and more things are going to come about with this. When it comes, I mean, we're already saw a huge increase in teledoc.
Oh yeah,
And I mean, I actually used the telehealth when I went through my issue, from why I'm even doing the Elevate podcast from 5 years ago when I had my issue. It was right in the middle of COVID. people weren't being seen in their clinics, and they're like, hey, you got Zoom? I go, yeah. He goes, we can do the session through Zoom. I'm like, okay. He's like, just find a quiet spot. And I'm like, okay. So I found a quiet spot. We did the EDMR for several sessions and got my things packaged that I was dealing with a little bit better, and a lot better, I should say. And that sparked, being on the backside of my crisis, that sparked the Elevate podcast thought process and what I'm doing right now with everything that I'm doing, that I've explained to you before, and that I've explained to all of our listeners, of course, that I have a course, I have coaching, I have ways of packaging and helping you with tools and whatnot to get to a space where you can make sure that the weight that we carry in our first responder world isn't overwhelming, and it's something we can deal with. And bringing you, guests like Dan here is one of these. I'm not about the one-stop shop. I want to make sure that we have options. My listeners, people that tune into my website or tune into my webinars or go through my coaching, when it comes to, hey, what else? This one thing didn't work for me. I didn't, I talked to somebody the other day that they did EDMR and it worked for a small period of time, but it wasn't long lasting. So they found a different version of a treatment, if you will. And, when it comes to detoxification and whatnot that Dan provides, this could be another layer that you didn't know about, and now you do. And you can explore it and do your research, have a conversation with Dan, read his testimonials, go to his website, find out all about that stuff. I know that you have a YouTube channel, if I remember right. You have a YouTube channel with things that explain it as well. So we'll put all that stuff in the links. But you know what? I just want to make sure that that you got everything out you wanted to get out in this short podcast. If there's anything else that you want to share with the audience that you feel is pressing, go ahead and share it. We can wrap this up and get this out to the people.
Well, thank you again for having me on, Kyle. But honestly, I think we've covered the most important stuff. And my website does have a lot more information at getdetoxinated.com. And the YouTube channel is also Get Detoxinated. So that's kind of a trademark, tagline. But I also do have a Facebook group, and it's the same name as the book, Sauna
Okay.
Detoxification Using Niacin. So be sure to join the group there. And I do have a monthly Zoom in with Daniel Root that I do. We just had that this last Tuesday. And in fact, we had some
Okay.
interesting dialogue on that particular episode, because they're trying to vilify niacin, and they're saying that it's causing cardiac, issues and things like that. And they're trying to scare people away from niacin, just like they have with zeolite. But in reality, their studies were so flawed because they weren't even the same kind of form of niacin that we use. And they already had cohorts that were cardiac patients. So they were already compromised. And so I had to talk about that. But there's even more exciting stuff coming. We're finding that when people have multiple metals in the body, there's a galvanism effect going on, which is causing electrical currents to flow through from one metal to the other. And that's causing people all kinds of conditions. And maybe we should do another show on that one. that's
Wow. Yeah. Once you find out more about that really, yeah. Cause we're electrical beings.
That's
I
right.
mean, plain and simple, put an EKG patches on you and read it. You can see the electrical format, and then when there's no electricity going through the body, you're dead. It's called asystole, right? We can see it on a monitor. So
Absolutely.
It's one of those things where, us being electrical beings, and if there's anything that affects the electrical realm of our bodies, it's definitely worth a look, for sure.
And I'm working.
All right, Dan, thanks so much. I appreciate you coming. Oh, yeah,
I was just going to
go
say,
ahead.
the doctor who is discovering this is Dr. Scott Schroeder, and I've been working with him and Dr. Harold Zelliger to try to actually do more research on this. So it's some exciting stuff going on, and it's literally, we're basically becoming biological batteries when we have differing metals in the body. Fascinating.
Right.
Anyway, again, thank you.
No problem at all. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the Elevate podcast. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell if you're watching this on YouTube so you get an alert when we go live or we put up a new episode. And if anything that we've said during this resonates with you and you want to know more, reach out to Dan, of course, reach out to me. All the stuff of Dan's will be in the lower description area, his Facebook page, his website, the book that he has there, where you'll be able to be a link, you go right directly to it. Anything that we we talked about. Dan's going to give me back an email that has all this stuff already built into it. So you'll be able to get everything we talked about inside of that. But don't hesitate. If you've heard something that let's say you're a loved one of a first responder, and that they've been in situations where there's definitely some toxic issues, when it comes to that, don't hesitate to share this episode with them. I encourage everyone to share this episode with someone else so we can grow the platform, so we can grow the messages and make Elevate Podcast do just that, elevate our first responders. Because one problem we're having with first responders is we don't have the retention and we don't have the recruitment. And I don't want to happen in 20 years when I'm old and frail to not have my first responders in my community be able to come and get me in a timely manner. So this is my little part of trying to help preserve our industry as well, to make sure that we have the amount of first responders compared to what we used to get back into the industry, and understand that it is a good profession and it's something we can package properly as we go through it. But thanks a lot, Daniel. Or sorry, I'm reading your name on the screen, so I know you go by Dan. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you, Daniel.
Like my parents would be, right? Yeah, that's the only time I ever heard Daniel. Anyway, yeah, thank you again.
Yeah,
guys.
and I don't have a long version of my name, so it was always the middle name with me, Kyle Howard. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. But I also want to say,
Daniel or Dan, Jesus.
Yeah. I also want to say thank you
Go
for
ahead.
everybody's service too. We wouldn't be here without you guys. So again, it's been a pleasure to be on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dan. And we'll have you on again talking about the next layer of all the research that you're doing, and be very interested in hearing where that goes. I'm always interested in hearing the newest, the latest, and greatest of everything. So we appreciate you coming on. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support. Take care. That's a wrap for this episode of Elevate, brought to you by Frontline Empowerment Solutions, your partner in building resilience and fostering continued growth. If you found something valuable today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next conversation. We're here to bring you more stories and insights, all aimed at strengthening the first responder community. Together, let's keep elevating each other, one episode at a time.